Can you bleep out my cuss words?
No, you can just go for that.
The condom commercial has already happened.
Well, now, I was hoping I could hear that.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to The Inside, a podcast where we get into the extraordinary minds and experiences of everyday people. I'm Jay, and with me, as always, is Adam. Hey, Adam. How's it going, eh?
Pretty good, man.
Good. I want to start off right away asking you some questions, all right?
Go for it.
All right. Have you been reading any good books lately? Have you seen any good movies or TV shows? Or how about any good food? Like, we've eaten a lot of good food. Have you spoken to anyone interesting? What are you, Santa Claus? Are you Santa Claus now?
I'll answer one of those for you. You're just sparting them off.
Hurry up, answer.
I'll tell you what I've been reading. I read this book called Artemis. It's a really good, like, realistic fiction kind of book about, like, the physics, chemistry, and economics of colonizing the moon.
Oh, Adam, that sounds so good. Like, you really captured me with economics and chemistry.
You know what?
I mean, you really had me wanting to read that, man.
Yeah, shut up, all right? I mean, what have you been reading, huh?
Well, actually, I've been reading a memoir, Adam.
Huh.
Yeah. I've been reading a memoir of my neighbor, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's it about?
Well,
is he like living in like a nursing home, like hitting on the nurses and stuff?
No, he's not that old, man.
Okay.
No, Adam. It's a memoir. Okay. It's about his life.
And how would you hit on those nurses?
Yeah. Come on. I mean, he's probably got another 20 years before he gets there. But really, it's super interesting because he grew up right here in Western North Carolina. Woo! And he covers what that was like, but he also writes a lot about his experiences in Vietnam as a load rigger and a door gunner.
Dang.
Which, pretty scary stuff. He was a logger in the area for 40 years, and that has nothing to do with dropping a deuce. And, like, he was a hardcore adventure racer. So,
dang.
Yeah.
That is intense. He sounds like he's lived an eventful life. That sounds really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I also think one thing that struck me was he wrote about being involved with the veterans associations and, like, helping people who are, like, coming out of war and the military situations
That's good.
Yeah, and, like, they're needing a lot of support with, like, PTSD and other related problems, and he's allowed himself to be vulnerable with his own experiences to help some of these other folks. Yeah.
Well, like, what are we waiting for? Let's get him on the show ASAP.
Like, how ASAP, Adam?
Right now.
Well, guess what, Adam?
What?
I can take care of that because he's our guest.
He's our guest? Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I can't believe it worked out like that.
I know, man. I don't know. We always work it out like that.
Yeah, somehow. Well, how about this? Let's take a quick break. Okay. I'm going to go on a photo shoot. And then we'll bring on Tom. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I'm super excited. And I'm really excited to hear what our sponsor has to say this week.
Yeah. Jay, you know our planet's struggling, right?
Yeah, Adam, of course, everybody knows that. But you know what? You know what else everybody forgets? Is that one of the R's from the triangle is reuse.
That's right. Luckily, though, Reuse Industries is here to help. When people are done with something, Reuse Industries takes it off your hands to avoid that from going into the ocean or the landfill, and they take it and mail it to someone else who didn't even ask for it.
Yeah, Adam, and I really think that's an amazing thing about Reuse Industries. And you know, actually, I just got my first delivery yesterday.
Dang.
Yeah. And it had somebody else's toothbrush in it.
What? I bet there were still a couple good bristles left on it, too.
There was like half a head that was not used up yet.
Dang, yeah. I actually got mine in the mail a couple of days ago, and it had someone else's yearbook in it. And it was to a school I never went to. I mean, how cool is that?
It's really cool, especially for you, Adam, because that opens up your dating scene a lot. I mean, really, Adam, I'm just kidding. But you know what? one of the best things I ever got from Reuse Industries was some toilet paper. And I mean, I can reuse it because there's a whole nother side on there that's never been touched.
Exactly. And if you guys want to get connected to Reuse Industries like we are, just follow the link in our Instagram and use the promo code INSIDE to get started with a free box set of reused garbage bags.
Well, hey, Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Jay and Adam, for having me here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on.
We really are. We're gonna get into the memoir that you're finishing up writing in just a little bit. But we were hoping that first you would just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are.
Well, that can be kind of quick and short. My name is Tom Baker. I'm an Army brat. I was born in Fort Knox, Kentucky in 1948. And according to my fine birth certificate, that makes me 72. My father, thank you. My father was an old brown boot sergeant major who served under George Patton during the Second World War. He's with the 8th Armored. And if you've ever seen the movie We're Soldiers, Sam Elliott's character, Sergeant Major Plumley, my daddy was very much like him, very gruff. I think all sergeant majors are. So it was an interesting childhood. But I'm a forester and a logger. I bought timber and logged in western North Carolina and North Georgia and eastern Tennessee for over 45 years. I joined the military, joined the Army in April of '67 at the ripe old age of 18.
Yeah.
I went to airborne infantry. My MOS was 11 Bravo, but I was also a parachute rigger. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but I wanted to be an airborne ranger, and Uncle Sam said, no, we need parachute riggers. I got to Vietnam on the 21st day of February, 1968. And if you're familiar with the war, the 1st of February was the beginning of the Tet Offensive. I worked out of the airfield at Phu Bai, which was about 8 miles south of Hue. We rigged out skid loads to resupply the Marines at Quai Son. Since I was infantry, I volunteered for a quick reaction force. Everybody, all the grunt units were getting hit hard. Grunt units being infantry units, were getting hit hard, and they needed a quick reaction force to go out and help them occasionally. And so I was part of a quick reaction force with the 2nd Battalion, 504th, 101st Airborne. I transferred out of the 101st after about 4.5 months to be a door gunner. I got to tell you this little story. I got drunk one night, and First Sergeant was a pretty good guy, and I knew him. Told the First Sergeant that I was tired of that crap. And he just kind of laughed, and he said, well, Becker, he said, you can get out of here in a body bag, or you can be stupid enough to be a door gunner. And he just grinned. So I transferred out to be a door gunner. They sent me to an outfit, the first of the night, first cab. They had been shot up real bad in the latter part of '67, and they were needing door gunners. I got shot down twice. Was very lucky. Crawled away from both of them. Was awarded the Bronze Star for one incident. I guess the thing I was more proud of was I was given a Ranger tab by a group of Army Rangers who were in a LRP, Long Range Recon Patrol group. We pulled them out of a very, very hot situation and managed not to get shot down. And they knew I always wanted to be a Ranger. So 3 days before I left Nam, they gave me one of their tabs, which I keep on my Harley jacket today. So I'm president and co-founder of a local veteran support group. and I am the author of one novel, The Hawk and the Dove, and trying to get my memoir out. My wife's trying to edit all my misspelt words. So that's pretty much it on that end of it, guys.
Well, thanks for that. That introduction, Tom. I was going to go back a year or two. You grew up in the tiny little town of Webster, North Carolina, and in your memoir that Adam and I were lucky enough to read, you compared that kind of as a growing up like Opie Taylor, and as I read it, I really, and knowing you, I figured you were more of a mischievous, risky cousin of Opie Taylor. Would you describe to your listeners like what was Webster like then? And even if they don't know where Webster is,
it's pretty close to the Inside Studios recording center.
What was it like there, and what was it like to be a kid during that time? You know, there wasn't stuff to do like kids have today.
Well, you know, the high school and the elementary school were in one building, the old rock building there at Webster, just up from the river. Webster had been the county seat up until about 1915, when the railroad went through Silva, and C.J. Harris built the town, a big courthouse, and everybody in the county voted to remove the county seat or move it to Silva. A lot of the families were a little bit devastated financially, so Webster was a little bit of a lonely place. For some reason, at my age, when Dad was building our house, I was 5. Most of the kids in the neighborhood were 2 or 3 years older than me, and at that age, that's light years. So the founder of Western Carolina University, Robert Madison, had a son that lived there, and he had an old Model T, just like Opie Daddy did, or somebody kin to Opie. And he used to take me fishing down on the river a lot. So I always like to compare my growing up to that.
Did you guys whistle that song from the Andy Griffith Show?
Well, I don't even know if we had a TV then. It was a few years later that the show came out, I think. Yeah. Well, it's, it was fun. Our toys were making little stick soldiers, and my first bulldozer was a little milk carton that we used to put dirt around. So there wasn't no Walmarts, but it was a safe, quiet little community.
Tom, obviously from what you've said, your childhood was much different from mine. I didn't have any milk cartons for bulldozers growing up, but part of that was just like the technology available, like a sign of the times, kid supervision, and like what wasn't and what was kind of understood. So, I mean, clearly there's flaws in the way every generation has people growing up. But like, for example, learning disability challenges is much more understood now than it is back then. And you mentioned in your memoir that your brother had a learning disability and wasn't really given like appropriate educational opportunities in school. So what era would you say is healthier for a kid to be raised in? Because there's obviously pros and cons to mine and to yours.
I think it's a combination with all the technology and the way the schools reach out to kids now, that the learning opportunities are a lot greater now. My little brother Billy he was autistic. But nobody knew what autistic was back then. They just called him slow. And, I had difficulty reading until I got into 6th grade, and I was scared to death that I was slow. For kids like my brother Billy and a couple others in our class that never learned to read, or that were just reading disabilities, they struggle. Some of my classmates that dropped out 4th, 5th grade are still around here, and they did jobs and stuff. But now people pick up on that and help these kids that are struggling, and that's a good thing. The freedom and the non-fear of kids playing out in the woods and in the streets back then was great. You can't do that much today, but the educational opportunities are far greater, and that's awesome. So if you could put the two together and come up with a medium ground, it would be pretty nice, but life doesn't allow that.
Well, in your memoir, you wrote about the time when integration just came to Silva Webster School, and two of your friends, Leroy and Tommy, came to school with you. And you said that you played football with them. And one time y'all traveled to a town about an hour from here and experienced some severe racism firsthand. And I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about what happened and how that impacted how you see people for who they are now.
Well, it was a tough time back then for race relations. The beginning of the civil rights movement. Us boys had played with the young black kids in Sylvan around for a few years, and there wasn't no problem there. But the adults were just all to pieces. They integrated Little League, I think, in about '62, maybe somewhere in there. And Tommy Love and Leroy Jackson and two or three other black kids came out and played Little League with us. And, you know, we were buddies. We had no problem. And in '64, when I was a junior, my junior year in high school, they integrated the high school. And again, Tommy Love and Leroy Jackson and a young kid that might have been a cousin of Leroy's, James Jackson, and a few others, moved from the black high school there below the hospital to Silva Webster. And, you know, there was a scuffle or two, but no big deal. But there were some towns in this area, and I won't throw the name of the town out because it's changed quite a bit now.
Good.
But in '64, we played them at their stadium, and Tommy Love's mother called Coach Manley and said that, you know, we're not going to let Tommy go down there. We're afraid he'll get hurt. And so he was one of our star runners. Leroy was tailback also, and he never showed up until we got ready. The bus was leaving the school campus there, and his mother drove up and stopped right in front of the bus, and Leroy got out, and she's crying and told Coach Manley, "Don't let them hurt my little Leroy." So it was
Wow.
serious business. Leroy gets in the bus and sits beside the coach, and we drive down, and we get a police escort, car in front of us, cop car in front of us, and one behind, all the way to the football stadium. And they had civil defense lined up around the field for this one black kid. And it just,
it's a lot.
It was sad, you know. And they beat us that year, and they threw all kinds of stuff at our bus when we left. And there's one more part of that story that I'd like to tell.
Yeah.
If it's okay.
Sure.
We left the stadium and drove back to Bryson City to a little restaurant there on the river. We got off the bus and went in, and those of us that had a quarter or 50 cents ordered what we could. And the manager of the restaurant came out and looked at Coach Manley and said, we can serve all these kids except for that one. And he threw the N-word out. And, you know, Leroy just kind of lowered his head, and Coach Manley, son, he was a boss. Now, he was good. And he jumped up and stomped over to that manager, and he said, if Leroy doesn't eat, none of us will eat.
Yeah.
And he said, this bus will never stop here again.
Wow.
And we just packed up and left out of there. It was just one of those situations where as a young boy, you learn and pay attention to things. And that affected me right on through my life.
Right.
Well, and you mentioned that there was a sign around that town going in. Can you just say something about that briefly?
Yeah, there was a sign that went into that town, and I'll just. It was there, a big bold sign. It wasn't some little handmade thing. It was a big bold sign like "Welcome to so and so," and it said, and you can bleep this out. If you're a nigger, don't let the sun set on your ass in this town. And that was like a warning and a welcoming. So
Wow.
it was pretty sad. I don't know how long that sign stayed up, but it was up then and had been up for a while.
Well, Tom, just kind of moving ahead in your life, you grew up in Webster, but then, like you said earlier, at the ripe age of 18, you went to Vietnam. Was that something you got drafted for, or did you sign up to go over there?
Oh, no. As I said, I was an Army brat, and there was a war going on. And consequently, my SAT scores were extremely low, so I went ahead and joined. I was gung-ho, and if you joined, you could ask for certain schools, and all I wanted to do was be airborne and possibly go to Ranger School. So I joined when I was 18. Actually, I was a couple of months into my 19th year when I got to Nam. So we were sent to, several of us out of my basic company were sent to Fort Dix, along with, 190 other young guys from different basic training. And we were all destined to go to officer training school. So we had a whole company there. And just looking around, there were no black guys in that situation. There were a couple of Hispanics, and just at that time, the word was getting out that most of the draftees, there was a separation. If you went to college, you could get out of the draft, and so there was this separation of the kids that could afford to go, or that were maybe lucky enough or smart enough to go, and then the rest of us that were going to be going to Nam. So it was maybe a self-perceived separation, but it made you wonder if it was another poor man's war where the rich kids didn't have to go and the poor guys did. So it was a kind of a mental thing there. As far as the OCS, 3 days before we graduated from advanced infantry training, they had already given us our orders and had set our class date for OCS down at Fort Benning. Orders came down that canceled our OCS orders. The reason that came out years later was that there were some very young second lieutenants in Nam that were getting people killed and getting themselves killed. You're 19 years old and you got a platoon of men, 40-some men, and you don't know jack shit, but you think you do.
Right.
And,
hey, I'm 52 and I still feel that way.
Yeah. Well, when I was in AIT, there was an old drill instructor from Asheville. Got me aside and he said, Baker, he said, when you get out of OCS, you're going to Nam, don't you? And I shouted, yeah, I can do this. And he said, well, when you go over there, you get behind your platoon sergeant and you let him run that outfit for a couple of months and you learn and listen. And he said, if you survive that 2 months, then you can get out. But a lot of the young second Louis thought they knew everything and they'd get people killed. So that's where that comment came from. Not going as a second lieutenant might have kept me alive. Most second lieutenants, infantry second lieutenants in Nam died from headshots. And if you're in the field and you get ambushed, first thing you're going to do is look up to see what's going on, and pow, So there's a lot of opportunities for mistakes there.
Tom, what's it like? What was it like over there in Vietnam? Like, what was your first memory arriving in Vietnam like?
The rumors were that there were a lot of soldiers when you got off the plane in Nam and they opened the door, were shot going through the door. Now that was not, that might have occurred just a few times, enough to get the rumor started.
Yeah,
but
right.
Nobody was eager to be the first one out the door. And,
after you.
Yeah, that's it. You go up, I got time to shoot. Yeah. Anyway, once we got off the plane, the things that hit me, number one was the heat. God almighty, it was in February when I left Seattle. And I get over there and you get off the plane and it's like maybe 100 and 110 degrees on the tarmac runway. Very, very hot. The next thing was the smells. I mean, you got all that diesel fuel and you got the wood smoke that you really learned to pick up in a heartbeat. But the thing that most caught me, they were about 190 soldiers waiting to get on the plane that we were getting off of. And we had to march right by them. And, they're shouting, good luck, guys, cherries, da-da-da-da-da. But to look at some of them, not all of them, was that what we call a 1,000-yard stare of people that had done things and seen things that you shouldn't see when you're 19 years old. So it was an intensity in the eyes and just a hollow look that struck me very hard. And I probably had that look when I got onto the plane and others were getting off a year later. But those are the things that hit me the most.
You had mentioned earlier about being part of a quick reaction force. And in the memoir, you talk about your first village sweep and a little girl that you encountered and a Hershey bar and culture shock kind of all squished up in that experience. I was hoping you'd tell our listeners about that.
Well, I had been in the Nam about 7 days. We had volunteered for that quick reaction force the first day we were there. As a parachute rigger, it's what they considered rear echelon. We were there at the airfield. We weren't out in the bush. But as part of the quick reaction force, they put us out in the bush. Well, I hadn't had that opportunity yet. And I guess it was about the 6th or 7th day of my tour, Special Forces compound, which was just up the road towards Hue, a little bit east of that, got hit hard. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and Sergeant Moore coming in and throwed out some papers, and he said, "This is your last will and testimony. Who gets what and all that shit."
Wow.
And so you're 19 and you've been thrown some paperwork that you got to fill out your will.
Jeez.
And it's extremely sobering.
3 a.m.
And so we finished that and we set out on the sandbags, and you can see the fight. I mean, the rounds going in and explosions and stuff, even from that distance. And a few minutes later, Sergeant Moore comes back and he said, "The grunt units have taken care of that. We just need to sweep the village nearby," which means kind of like a serious walkthrough to make sure that the VC and NVA weren't hiding in there. So, we go outside the gate at Fubai, all these bigger fire bases, they have compound security fences. And when you go outside of that for the first time, you're vulnerable. You're in the Badlands, and I don't care who it is. if they say they weren't scared first time they went out there full of shit. So, I remember walking on that road. We were lined up on both sides. The lieutenant was out front and walking point, and Sergeant Moore was there. And we head towards this village. Well, we get there about daylight, and it's a typical Vietnam village. A lot of hogs and chickens and poverty and fire pits and you're told to look for the VC and hell, you don't know what the VC looks like.
Yeah.
So civilians, all of them could have been VC. None of them could have been VC. You just didn't know. And that was one of the tough things of that war and what these young kids in Iraq and Afghanistan are facing. You don't know who the enemy is.
It's the same kind of thing, right?
Same thing, just different people.
Yeah.
And so Sergeant Moore screams and says, "Be careful and check every hooch." And we're walking through the village, and I'm nervous as the dickens, and I said, "Be careful." And then all of a sudden I see movement out of the right corner of my eye, and I turn towards this hut. And I don't know if it's a VC going to come out of there. I didn't know what. And about a second later, this little girl comes out, 3, maybe 4.
Dang.
And starts walking towards me. Well, we'd heard, all of us had heard the tales of the children being strapped with explosives and blown up when they get around children. And in combat, guys, you got to make life and death decisions in a heartbeat or less. And I glanced around right quick, and there wasn't anybody. Bledsoe, my buddy, he was about 20 feet off, and if it had been a grenade, it wouldn't have really hurt him. So I wasn't going to shoot that little girl. So she kept walking towards me, and I shift my rifle from being pointed at her to port arms, and I just wait. I'm figuring if she's going to blow up right now. She was about 3 feet from me. And then she smiled, and God, my heart melted, and we're sitting there looking at each other, and then I just barely hear Sergeant Moore scream, "What the hell are you doing, Baker? Give her a candy bar and let's go." And it kind of brought me out of that daze, but there was 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, I don't know, that I didn't, I thought I was a goner. And I reached in my pocket and got that Hershey bar out and knelt down and handed it to her, and she smiled, and I winked, and she went back in that hooch. I tell people, and it's in the memoir, I didn't search that hooch. I didn't know if that was all a ploy to keep me from looking in there, and they had several VC in there. I don't know. I just hope that little kid remembers me. So, there were some guys that I knew that if they had been thrown in that situation, they would have shot her.
Yeah.
I just wasn't going to do that. So.
Yeah. Well, Tom, before you left for Vietnam, you were stationed in Fort Lee, Virginia, where you got to jump out of CH-21 helicopters, C-130s, and C-141 like jet cargo planes during the night, which that's a story amongst itself. But what was one of your most difficult or scary jumps? Because I can imagine there was some crazy stuff that happened up there.
Well, it's one of those deals where the first couple of jumps are scary down in jump school. But once you jump several times, you start building up a little naive, what's the word I'm looking for?
Confidence?
Confidence, yeah. And so we jumped that chopper. It was they called it the old banana. The Marine Corps used it a lot.
If you know what I mean.
Like
Yeah.
Wink,
wink.
Yeah. And the thing about a chopper jump is you have a much longer deployment. The chute doesn't come out as quick. Where you're jumping out of a plane or a jet, the prop blast or jet blast forces that chute open real quick. So they always taught you, count to 4. 1001 as you go out the door, 1002, 1003, 1004. And if your chute's not open by then, you know, you're dropping 400 or 500 feet. It's best to pull the cord on your reserve. Well, jumping out of a chopper, it's took me almost to a count of 6. And so you're going out and you're tucked and you're counting and you're seeing the ground come up at you, and you're about 600 feet off the ground when you feel that chute just kind of softly bellow out. I didn't want to pull that chute because oftentimes if you pull your reserve and then your main deploys, they get tangled up and you go down. So that's why they pay you that $55 extra a month. But the next interesting jump, we jumped to C-130, and there was a bunch of us in the air. And if in a fairly mass jump, if somebody chute comes across the top of another chute, the lower chute steals the air from the upper chute, and you will fall. Your chute may not collapse totally, but it'll just lose air, and you fall. And I hit right on top of this old boy's parachute, and you sink up to your knees, and they call it walking off silk. They train you for that. If you panic and you get tangled up, then if his chute doesn't collapse, you're riding his chute down and you don't hit right. You will break something. So I managed to walk off silk and slide off the edge of the parachute. And all I could do was look over and grin. And it was a buddy of mine. He was cussing me like a dog. But I bought him a beer that night and he calmed down. But
back when you were in Vietnam, you tell a story about when the helicopter you were on was actually shot down, and there was a colonel on there, and you had to pull him out, and you guys set up a perimeter and waited for the rescue team while you're just sitting back to back with guns out and ready to kick some butt. But I guess that didn't really hit you till later when it happened or what you'd been through.
Well, when you're 19, you think you're fairly invincible. But
I can confirm that.
Yeah, it's, you know, that's why they say take that hill when you're 19. When you get older, you say, I don't want to take that hill.
Right. But, why do I want that hill?
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Don't take this other hill. Ain't nobody on it. But, yeah, I was 19, and I was a ranking E5 in the company, H company, or 8th Troop was what the cab called me. And so I was the door gunner for the battalion commander, Colonel Rusi. And he was a gung-ho, crazy individual. And I remember we were his chopper, and I was his door gunner, was what they call a command and control chopper. So Alpha Troop was in a firefight down there on the ground, and he was up above them, and he wanted to go down and get closer to see what was going on. And the co-pilot was they called them, FNGs, a new guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he told the colonel, he looked at him and he said, Colonel, he said, I've got 2 kids and a wife back home. He said, I don't want to go in that low. And the colonel, I remember him just turning his head and looking at that guy. And he said, I've got command of the ship. And he took us down in the fight. So incidentally, we're in the fight and we get shot up pretty bad. And one of the rounds, or several of them, hit the hydraulics. And we start losing hydraulic power, which makes your blades go around. And he had to pull out of the fight. And we made it about a click, maybe a kilometer into the edge of an old field. And we hit really hard and bounced and hit again, but we didn't roll, and so it wasn't a crash and burn like you see a lot of the choppers. But my job was to get the colonel out, and the crew chief was to help the other guy, the FNG. Well, FNG got so scared he bolted out, crawled out, and took off in the bushes. And so I had to get the colonel out, and then I had to get the weapons out, and I had to get the command radio out. And so I set up a little perimeter, and the colonel and I got back to back. I had my 60 pointed at the chopper, which I figured that's where they'd come first. And the colonel had his back and his M16 pointed towards the jungle. And we were there less than an hour, but headquarters knew the colonel had been shot down, so they sent a rescue team in and got us out of there. But it was an interesting 45, 50 minutes. So,
Well, you got a Bronze Star though for a different helicopter incident. I think you mentioned that earlier about the Bronze Star.
Yeah, it was. We got a new colonel. We'd gotten a new colonel, and a couple of guys had been wounded pretty bad, and there was a Chinook helicopter got shot down, and they called for the medevacs, and the medevacs got there and said it was too hot for them. They wouldn't go in. They don't have to go in situations like that. Some of them were gutsy and would go into anything, but the two that day weren't that interested in going in.
Right.
So the colonel said, "Hell, we're going in." Down we went, and he always looked to me. He said, "Baker, go help them in." And so I had to unhook and get off the chopper and help them out of that Chinook, and then we loaded the wounded on too, and got them out of there. So they gave the colonel a Silver Star, and they weren't quite sure what to do with me and the crew chief, but they gave us a Bronze Star. So that's fine. That and a quarter will buy you a cup of coffee. I would back then, so.
Dang, Jay, that was a lot of content.
Yeah, man. And you know what, Adam?
What?
We still have a lot more content to go.
Well, how about this, Jay? Because there's so much here, why don't we make this episode into a 2-part episode?
I think that's a good idea because I don't want anybody to miss any of this stuff. So
exactly.
We'll launch this half now, and the second half we'll launch in a week.
Exactly. So give everyone time to listen to it 7 times in a row, so they'll be ready for that pop quiz. Well, we'll see all of y'all in a week when we wrap up Tom's story.
You ready, son?
Yeah, son.
We're walking through the village, and I'm nervous as the dickens, and all of a sudden I see movement out of the right corner of my eye, and I turn towards this hut. And about a second later, this little girl comes out and starts walking towards me. In combat, guys, you got to make life and death decisions in a heartbeat or less. I wasn't going to shoot that little girl.